and welcome to early Monday morning edition of the Tech Guys Midnight Court. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy, half fedora, Doctor Who scarf, and all that will travel. And I am delighted to spend maybe between 20 minutes and a half hour early this morning uh, sharing some thoughts and so forth with you. Want to remind you that if you want to find the Tech Guy everywhere else, you can find me at DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuy blog.com. You can find me on terrestrial radio rather than just on this podcast on WQPH 89.3 FM Shirley Fitchburg. The live stream of that is available at their site at WQPHradio.org, or so there's a link on at the Tech Guy blog. My show is Your Prayer Intentions every Saturday noon. It's a half-hour prayer show, and if you have prayer intentions, you can email them to WQPH at WQPH893@comcast.net, and we'll be delighted to pray for them. And I'm going to start this show by asking for some prayers for my wife. My wife's been having a little bit of a hard time lately. Appreciate some prayers there, and I do want to apologize if we're kind of jumping in on this. Didn't have as much time to get ready. Wife had a tough day at work, and a good piece of advice for people who want to stay married for a long period of time. When your wife is having a bad day, podcasts and stuff like that don't matter. Take care of the wife, take care of the family business first. Because podcasts and stuff like that, they'll always be there later. But your wife and family, when they need you, you want to be there. That's just 101. That's Life 101. And speaking of Life 101, I got to tell you that as I watch the Democrats go on, it's been funny. I mean, we have the Tulsi Gabbard business, which we talked about a little bit, where they've changed the debate rules to make sure that she's not on the debate stage. And I can't say as I blame the Democrats, because I wouldn't. Seriously, remember, she took out Kamala Harris. Would you want the woman who took out Kamala Harris on the stage with Joe Biden if you were the Democrats? In fact, not so sure I'd want her on the stage with Bernie Sanders. I mean, she'd tear these people to pieces. And plus, it would be too much of a contrast to have a young, beautiful woman and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. So you can't have that. So Tulsi Gabbard is going to be left out. I don't know what she's going to do about it, but it will be interesting to see how many of our friends on the left who were crying sexism when Elizabeth Warren was eliminated, to see if they have anything to say along those lines. Now the Gabbard's being kept out. It's an interesting situation, and we're going to have to see where that goes. What's been more interesting lately has been the Democrats and the coronavirus, though. The Democrats, and as a general rule, it's a bad idea to root against your country, especially in an election year. And we've had the spectacle of Democrats praying for bad economic news, hoping for a recession, trying to generate one about a year and a half ago, and having very little luck along those lines because the Trump economy is excellent. And it's just ridiculous thing to see all of this going on. And now that the coronavirus is around and that there's some effects going on in terms of various places having to shut down. I mean, if there's production in China shutting down, then there's going to be supply chain issues for some products. Like, in fact, where I work, there's a lot of various things that come in from China. And it hasn't affected us yet, at least not to my knowledge. But I'm assuming that sooner or later in the supply chain, there's going to be a bump. And it'll probably affect us to some degree. I don't know how much. But that's something that's going to happen. And there's a very important lesson there, and that's being ignored, especially when it comes to pharmaceuticals, which are made in China, is that just as we have a strategic oil preserve, we should have a strategic pharmaceutical reserve, and it should be stuff made in the U.S. Even if it's something that's made under the auspices of the government. Now, that's one of the few things that the government should be doing. That's a worthwhile government situation. But the fun thing, as I said, has been the media and the virus. The media seems to be absolutely praying for disaster because of the coronavirus. And it's got so silly, I felt compelled to write a parody song. And I didn't realize until after I wrote it that someone had actually approached Weird Al Yankovic to write a song called My Corona, and he declined because there's nothing actually funny about a virus killing a bunch of people and making people sick. I mean, there's the famous Monty Python sketch where Graham Chapman's over there, cholera, bubonic plague, and all of a sudden you see a bunch of people in dressed up as undertakers all, oh, those were the days. I mean, Python could get away with that. But there's nothing really funny about a bunch of people getting sick, but there's an awful lot of funny about how the Democrats are reacting to this. It's really, really getting silly. And I'm gonna have to apologize because I am not a great singer. But if you go to the Tech Guy blog right now, you will see the lyrics to the song. And it's to the tune, of course, of My Sharona by the Knack. It's back from 1979. And to give you an idea, one of the choruses, never gonna stop, give it up. Oh, it's panic time now. The Trump stock market, that stock market, it's gonna go dive, 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 woo. And the idea being that the Democrats want the stock market to dive. Then you have the second verse. Then we can blame Trump for the people who die. Again, the Democrats anxious to see casualties. And then they're anxious to have the economy. Let me die. And of course, Barack Obama would chip in as they're singing that voice. Actually, that economy is mine. This should be made into a parody video to hit the Democrats, and someone more talented in this situation would have to do it than me, and someone with more time than me, someone who does this full time. If you want to see the song, I think the song is funny, go to DaTechGuyblog.com. I'm not going to recite the song. I'm not going to sing it. I am not much of a singer, and it's like 12:46. It's late at night. I don't want to get loud singing. My wife and family do not like actually, people do like my singing, but my wife and family are not among them. So we're not going to do that right now. But check out the song. What's funny about this is it's not making fun of the virus. It's not making fun of the problems the virus has. It's making fun of the Democrats as anxious. I mean, the original My Sharona song is all about wanting Sharona, who's a young girl. And this is basically all about Democrats wanting the virus to hit the economy, wanting the virus to hit the stock market, wanting the virus to kill people, all so they can get Trump. And if you're looking at it on TV, if you're looking at how the Democrats have been acting with this, it's just ridiculous. And there are people who seem to be actually anxious for disaster because they figure it's their best shot. And again, this is what happens when you become too obsessed with politics. I mean, politics is fun. Politics is interesting. I've been interested in politics all my life. But one of the nice things about blogging about this for so long is that I've gotten a much better perspective on all of this. And the world, I'm not going to let real life be interrupted by all this. When Obama was president, I didn't obsess over it because there was real life to live and real things to do. But okay, we are definitely not going to read that post from Instapundit that I just happened to scroll and see. But if you want to check out Sunday at 8 p.m., there's a very interesting thing there which I am concerning the coronavirus, which I am not going to read on this podcast because I still do a Catholic radio show, and we're not going to cross over too badly on that. Oh, the world is getting silly, but you don't want to get too obsessed with all this. And the Democrats just have become so obsessed with Trump, so obsessed. And it's really amazing to see it because, and this is something I've said before, but I'm not going to elaborate about until either after this election or after the election in 2022, is that I think the Democrats have a very easy way of handling Trump if they wanted to. But I don't think they're capable of it. And I would explain it to you, but I don't want them to do so. I have absolutely no idea. I think it's very obvious, but it's not obvious to them. And because it's not obvious to them, they'll never think of it. And it's sort of like there's one of the Screw Tape letters where they're trying to figure out what's God's real game. These are a book about a bunch of devils going after God, trying to tempt humans, and they're trying to figure out what's God's real game in loving humanity. And I think the president is very easy to figure out. But it takes a little time. It took a little time to come to that conclusion, because I was a lot of us were very suspicious of the president right at the beginning. I mean, I was a Ted Cruz guy, and then he started doing stuff. And then after a couple of months, it became very clear the way he does things and the type of guy he is. And that's actually another thing I want to bring up. And we talked about in this, the president mentioned when Mike Bloomberg dropped out. He kind of taunted him, saying, "See, it's not easy to do what I do, is it?" Now think about that. You have 3 billionaires. You have President Trump, you have Tom Steiner, and you have Mike Bloomberg, all with different amounts of funds. I think Steiner has a little bit less than Trump. Bloomberg has a lot more. All of these men are successful. All of these men are capable. I mean, they were capable of creating fortunes, although President Trump had a little help because there was money in the family. But the point being that they're all capable to some degree. And yet these men were not able to do what President Trump did. And one of the reasons is, if you look at like Mike Bloomberg, the way he carries himself as if he's better than people in a lot of ways, which is odd because he didn't come from wealth. You would think that he'd have a little more empathy. But President Trump carries himself with more empathy to the regular guy, as if President Trump understands he's lived as a high roller. He's lived, expensive cars, expensive food, and all that stuff. But he understands that somebody's busting their ass to grow that food. He's not the guy who's growing the food. He's not the guy who's creating who's making the gasoline. That there are people, experts, regular people who work very hard to do it. And part of that, I believe, is because he's in construction. You're building things. You have to have people who are engineers. You have to have experts to do these things. And these guys are very smart. And I think he got that appreciation of it. And maybe it's something he always had. Maybe it's something that his father impressed upon him. But whatever the reason, he gets that. So he can empathize with upstate New York, for example, where food is grown, while Cuomo cannot, or Bloomberg cannot. And that's really the difference. They don't understand that in the end, you can do without Bloomberg News. Millions of people lived many years without Bloomberg News. You can't live without a farmer. You can't live without somebody producing your food and producing enough food so that there's a surplus so they can not only feed themselves, but feed hundreds and thousands of people. The genius, the thing that makes America so self-sufficient is we're self-sufficient in food, and now we're self-sufficient in energy. Food, water, energy. We don't have to depend on other countries for these 3 things. As they say in the game Civilization, millions have lived without love. Nobody has lived without water. And that's a basic thing, and the president gets it. And these other guys don't. And like these other Bernie's guys, they don't get it. I mean, like I forget who it was on MSNBC who said, Mike Bloomberg spent so much money, they could have given $1 million to every American. And the math is just totally off. But these are people who do not have been so big on slogans. They're not big on thought. And that's why they can get giddy over the virus, as I mentioned in the show here today. And if you and they don't understand how that plays. And again, they're forgetting that they have to beat Trump. I mean, granted, they're going to be able to steal a lot better than they did before because they see him coming. They didn't see him coming last time. But they have to beat him. They have to take away votes that he already had. And he's been going on the offense. So if you have to grow your base, you have to get people there. And turning people off doesn't do it. I mean, look at Joe Biden in AB5. If you go to on Twitchy, there's a great piece about how Joe Biden has come out in favor of that AB5, that killer bill that kills freelancers. And there are a bunch of leftists online who are like, "Oh, don't do this, don't say this. Now you're going to force us to vote for Trump." And the point is, if he says one thing and then says the other the next day, why would you trust him? The guy can't be trusted. But a lot of the things with Biden, there's one other thing about Biden, though. And this is something that I think a lot of us on the right are getting wrong about him. And it's going to be a mistake if we rely on it too much. We make an awful lot of fuss about his gaffes. And I mean, they're funny. Biden's gaffes are funny. But the reality is, Biden's been making gaffes like this for 30, 40 years. In fact, you might remember back in the days when I was big into Morning Joe, they used to have a thing that said, "This is a no criticize Joe zone." Because, it didn't matter what Biden said. They wouldn't criticize him because they gave him a wash on this. Because this is what Biden has always been a gaffe guy. He's always been a foot in your mouth guy. And just as the president's behavior in some fashions are baked into what conservatives think about President Trump. They understand he can be vulgar on Twitter and so forth, but that was baked in. All these things that people were saying about the president were baked in. So it didn't make a difference to voters who were supporting him. In the same way, Biden's gaffes are baked in among Democrats. The Democrats aren't going to reject him over the gaffes. They're used to it. They just roll off their back in the same way that the things that shock the Democrats about Trump roll off our back. So we have a lot of people. I mean, people keep talking about this gaffe guy, and I know it can be fun. But if you're expecting to beat him over gaffes, that's ridiculous. You are not going to beat them over gaffes. You are not going to. You are just not going to beat him on gaffes. Now, you don't need gaffes to beat him. You've got Trump's record versus Obama's record, because basically, and that's one nice thing about Biden running. I like the idea of Bernie being his opponent, because I thought we should nip this socialism stuff in the bud. Nip it now while there's less socialists. While there's more people alive in the Democrat Party who still who were taught that socialism is bad, we have the socialists are weaker. We want to beat them decisively now, in my opinion. So as far as I'm concerned, for the country, it would be better if Bernie Sanders was the nominee and we crushed him now. And that would make it also less likely to see a socialist third party. That would actually help the Democrats, but they don't see that. But it's also healthy to have a Trump versus Biden race, because Biden represents the Obama administration and 8 years of Obama versus 4 years of Trump's. And I can't think of a clearer choice. I mean, I cannot imagine people wanting to go back to those days. And this is something I've mentioned before. And I've mentioned this, I believe, when I was guest hosting the Joe Mangiacotti show about a month ago from the same location. I had to do it here from the house because it was 6 a.m. I couldn't wake. I didn't want to risk waking up the wife getting down there. And I'm saying, and think about this for a second. If you're 18 and you have a 22-year-old brother or sister, and that brother or sister who graduated 4 years ago had a bunch of debt and couldn't find a job, and you're 18 and you can find a job, you're going to notice that difference. If you weren't working 4 years ago and you're working now, you're going to notice that difference. it's gonna. I mean, people are gonna notice that. Remember, it's. I mean, and it's not that long ago. It's not like Patriots fans. Right now, we have a lot of Patriots fans who are going nuts because of Tom Brady possibly leaving, and they don't remember the days when we used to always lose. I remember when Boston teams used to always lose. That's why I'm very grateful for everything we've gotten right now. If Brady stays and we don't win, I don't care. I'd like Brady to stay just because he gave us these 6 titles. But people don't understand how hard it is to win a title because it's been so easy to get to these games lately. It's been so easy for Boston teams to win lately. But the Trump economy that we're having now, we haven't seen anything like this since the Reagan days. And even the Reagan days, in my opinion, weren't as good. And I'm looking at this, and because the Obama years are only a couple of years back, this isn't like trying to explain the Depression to people. The people, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, all remember the Obama years and remember not being able to get work. Now, they might say the right thing because they don't want Antifa to go beat them up. Or the next James G. Hodgkin come down and shoot at them. Because they're going to shoot at the Democrats before they shoot at us because they figure we're armed. But people, doesn't matter. They remember. And people who are now making good, who weren't making good 4 years ago, they're not going to sell themselves this way. It's just not going to happen. Democrats are going to basically have to use their fraud machines to try and to get it close. But I don't think they're going to manage it close. Now, you can't take this stuff for granted, of course. You have to work very hard. The moment you take any game for granted, you risk losing. But I'm going to tell you, that's why they're so interested in my Corona. Because they need something. They know they need something. They know they need something bad to try and beat Trump. And sometimes, and again, this is just conjecture what I'm about to say here. There are times when I think that the reason why they're so anxious to put Biden out there is because, and I may have already said this on the previous show, that they don't want to risk any of their younger or quote unquote up and coming candidates in a futile effort to beat Trump. I mean, if you're going to sacrifice somebody, Biden's the person to sacrifice. But I'm telling you right now, this is why you're going to see the media, and they're going to continue to push this coronavirus. They're going to push it big. Now, every indication seems to be that it's a little bit. It's like the flu, only a little worse. Now, I'm no medical expert. I don't pretend to be a medical expert. But from what I'm seeing, and from what's actually happening versus what the left is saying is happening, it looks like it's going to be a lot like a flu. And we've had swine flu. We've had all kinds of flus over the years. Again, this is one of the advantages of being a little older, is that you have seen things like this before and you know not to panic. But panic sells newspapers. Panic sells eyeballs. And that's really what happened with Trump, in the sense that they built up the president as this gigantic villain in order to sell. That was their product. Their product as the president as this monstrous evil. And the media sold that. That has been their product. That fear of the president has been the product they've been selling. And I think it's a lousy product to sell. Because you can only tell people that the camps are coming so often before they realize that the camp's not coming. And we talked about this again in our Kamikaze Scotsman episode. So expect a lot more my Corona from the Democrats. They are going to be all over. Again, check out the song. I think it's amusing. We need a Steven Crowder or someone like that to do the music and make a video of it. I think it would be rather funny. But that's really what the Democrats have become. They're going all in on the coronavirus because they know it's a better chance than Biden. It's a better chance than Sanders, then it's probably a better chance than Gabbard. Which, by the way, one other thing about Tulsi Gabbard that I wanted to mention, and I mentioned this on a post earlier this week. As a person who wants Trump to win, Gabbard being gone is not in the debates is good, because of the three, the candidate with the best chance of beating the president would be Tulsi Gabbard. Do I think she has a prayer of beating him? Not in the least. But if I had to pick one of those three, she would have a better shot. That's my thought. But I'm glad that the candidates that I was most worried about are gone. They're long gone. Not going to worry about that. Well, let's see. We've been on for about 25 minutes, and it's my experience that people aren't going to watch much longer than that. So I want to close with this, and I mentioned a little bit of Doctor Who last time. I'm going to mention a little more now because I really wanted to do a whole episode on it, but there's too much politics going on, and this is really a political site. So, but I want to talk about, again, socialism. Remember, the BBC gets its money from its license fee. There's been huge feedback at the BBC over the changing of the Doctor Who canon. They've totally remade the origin of the Doctor, which has been established for 50 years, which fans like myself people have been into for decades. And they did it to make it more woke. And now, as a guy who was into the series, who first watched it in the mid-70s and got very into it in the early 80s, when the show came back, I noticed the woke themes that they were adding little woke things. They added a little woke things in the first season, and they added a little woke things in the second season. It's become more and more and more woke as the years have gone on. But they didn't push us out. But they want us out now. They want a different customer base, and they don't care if it's smaller. And as my son said, they're John Nathan Turnering the series. And what's funny about it is they did this once before during the Thatcher years. They were specifically writing anti-Thatcher type scripts. And there was a piece, the actor, Sylvester McCoy, who played the Seventh Doctor, and Sophie Aldred, who played his companion Ace, talked about how this was their way of going after Thatcher. And the show ended up canceling because it chased away half the audience. Now, I'm still hoping that there'll be a Bobby Ewing moment where they put everything back. But they seem to have doubled and tripled down on all this stuff. But again, this is socialism. Once they have a monopoly of power, they can do this. And there's one more thought concerning this and the coronavirus. The same people who are saying that President Trump is not handling this well is saying that the government should be handling all the healthcare. Think about that for a second, and think about the logical implications of that. Well, that's all the time we have today. I actually have to be someplace at 10 in the morning, so I should probably think about getting some sleep. We are going to be back on Friday for another half hour or so, and sometimes we go a little longer on Friday because I don't have to work Friday, so I can stay a little later. It's on Sunday. It's a little bit different today because I have adoration next day, and this is the beginning of my work week. I'll be working till midnight again tomorrow, and the rest of the week until Thursday. But if you like the podcast, give it a thumbs up or leave a comment. If you really like it, hit the tip jar at DaTechGuyblog.com, DaTechGuyblog.com. I want to thank people who've already done so, because the reason why we started up this podcast, not only just to let me vent again, was because I wanted to increase a little bit of traffic, increase a little tip jar, so I needed a value added, and this is it. Remember, DaTechGuyblog.com, DaTechGuyblog.com. Remember, the Tech Guy's Magnificent 7. And whether you watch this live when I do this Monday mornings or Friday mornings, or whether you watch it later on because you used to like the old radio show, thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Feel free to leave feedback and comments as well. We want to know what you want me to talk about. And when I know what you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. Till then, this is Pete the Tech Guy saying that the Tech Guy's Midnight Court is now adjourned for the evening, or I should say the morning. Take care, all.